You know, for over 30 years, I've shared with you new discoveries based in science through my eyes as a scientist. As I run across these discoveries in the obscure peer-reviewed journals that are often very technical in nature, many of the discoveries are so new. I have medical students and medical doctors in my seminars asking me, why don't we see this information in the universities? Why don't we know about these discoveries? And the answer is because it often takes years for the discoveries to trickle down from the research labs and the research papers into the application of everyday life, of everyday medicine. It can take 6, 8, 10 years for this to happen. I've often referenced a discovery that was made in 1991 regarding the human heart. The discovery of approximately 40,000 specialized cells in the human heart. They're called sensory neurites. They're essentially brain-like cells, but they're not in the cranial brain. Now, when I say they were discovered in 1991, they were always there. It's perhaps more accurate to say they were recognized in 1991, but they've been with us from the time that we emerged as anatomically modern humans onto this planet. And we know this because when we compare our genome today, the DNA in our bodies, with the DNA that we can now extract from the fossilized remains of our ancient ancestors, what we find is that the genome hasn't changed, that we've had these capabilities from the time that we emerged on this planet. The discovery in 1991, 40,000 specialized cells in the human heart, forming a neural network that thinks, feels, remembers independently of the cranial brain. Every experience that we have in life is registered in two places, in our cranial brain and in the neural network in our heart. If they're good experiences, no worries. Often we have experienced trauma in our lives, and we each interpret that trauma a little bit differently. An experience that may traumatize one person may not be interpreted as trauma to another person. And there are some experiences that are so painful universally, they are traumatic experiences. And when we go to heal those experiences through counseling and through therapy, often the counseling and therapy addresses the cranial memories, and that helps, and that's important. The cranial therapies may not address the therapies or the memories that we hold in our heart. You and I are the only form of life that we know of today that has the ability to self-regulate our biology in very precise ways. We are such advanced, such highly sophisticated biological systems, what is often called soft technology. We're not talking about computer chips and wires and chemicals. We're talking about neurons and cell membranes and crystalline bone functioning in our bodies in very, very powerful and profound ways that we can self-regulate through thought, feeling, emotion, belief, breath, focus. And if those all sound familiar to you, they happen to be the principles preserved in some of our most ancient and cherished indigenous and spiritual traditions. And I think this is why they were preserved in the ways that they have been, because they hold such a powerful potential in our bodies. Science is only beginning to understand, recognize, and embrace this potential. So the ability to harmonize the heart and the brain, the ability to harmonize the cranial network with the network in the heart. This neural network, this is what is available to you and to me in a way that's available to no other form of life, consciously, at will, and on demand. You and I are the only form of life that we can sit down in a chair like this in a moment in time or wherever you are and say, in this moment, I choose to harmonize the neural network in my heart and my brain, two separate organs, but we harmonize them into one potent system in our bodies. So what I'm going to invite you to do, acknowledging that we're all feeling some kind of anxiety right now. If we can ease that anxiety, we're strengthening our immune system. We're lighting up the rejuvenation of our hormone system. We are giving ourselves the opportunity for better sleep, better appetite, all because we're relieving some anxiety. And this is why I wanted to share this technique with you. So I'm going to invite you, if you haven't already, to close your eyes if you are in a place that is safe. And allow your awareness to move from the world around you to the world within you. I'm going to do the same thing with you right here. In 1991, scientists discovered neurons in the human heart, similar to those in the brain. And it's those neurons that we're communicating with right now. I'm going to invite you in a way that's comfortable to touch your heart center with a finger or two fingers or maybe a palm of your hand. And that physical touch will draw your awareness from your mind into this place in your body, into your heart, so that you can focus in your heart. And this is where the neurons that know what we're doing, the neurons, the intelligence of the human heart exist in those neurons and others. So I'm going to invite you to touch your heart center gently in a way that's comfortable for you. And as you breathe, and we'll breathe a little bit slower than usual. The purpose of a slower breath is to tell your body with that slower breath that you are safe. So as we inhale a little bit slower than usual, we'll do this together. What you're saying to your body is, I am safe. And as you inhale, I'm going to invite you either out loud or silently to yourself, with that breath that you inhale, to breathe in the words inner ease. And as you release that breath, release the anxiety that is in your body. Now, let's do this a few times right now. The first breath, inhale, a little bit slower than usual. Inner ease. And release. You release the anxiety in your body. I release the anxiety in my body. Second breath, inner ease. I breathe inner ease into my body. As you release, just feel that anxiety melt from your body. Breathe again, inhale, inner ease. Inner ease. Inhale again. And just feel the shift in your body as you breathe inner ease, as your breathing slows, as you release that anxiety and tension. I'm feeling it right now. Again. Inner ease. Okay. One more breath. I'm going to invite you to inhale inner ease. And as you release, give thanks for the ease with which you flow through your day. Thank you. Thank you for the ease of this day. Gently begin to open your eyes. Become present in your space. Nature is simple until we make it complex. Science is simple until we make it complex. Science describes our relationship with nature. What could be any more simple than breathing the breath of life at a slower pace, telling your body that you are safe, regardless of what's happening in the world around you? You're saying, in this place, in my domain, I am safe. And using the neuro-linguistic properties of the words and your experience of what you associate with that words to replace the anxiety in your body. You can do this if you're feeling fear. What is it that you'd like to replace that fear with? If you're feeling hurt because of loss, we are all losing something. We're losing a way of life. We're losing loved ones. We're losing families. We're losing relationships. People are losing marriages. The experience of human loss is one of the most mysterious experiences, probably one of the least understood, although it is the most common. Because the truth is that we will all lose in our lives at some point the things, the places, the people, the pets, the relationships that we love and cherish the most and the deepest. We will lose those things
And our society really doesn't prepare us very well for that loss. We cannot change the loss. All we can do is change the significance that we give to the loss. And it is through emotional resilience, spiritual resilience, psychological resilience, mental resilience, and physiological resilience that we redefine what the loss means to us. As we begin to give new meaning to what it is that we've lost, still honoring the deep relationship we have with who or what it is that we have lost. As we begin to change the way we think and feel, what happens is our neurons begin to wire differently, and that difference is reflected in our perception of the loss. We don't want to forget, because those people, places, and things are a part of our history. The key to our mastery is to embrace the loss while transcending the hurt. One of the aspects of this mystery is that the deeper the hurt that we experience in our loss, the more we discover our capacity to love. I had this conversation when I was with the monks and the nuns in Tibet. And what they helped me to understand is that it's only through the depth of our hurt, when our family is ripped away from us or our loved ones are torn from us, and we can't even describe what that is. We have to reach so deep into our being to find the capacity for the love to transcend the hurt. It's through the depth of our pain that we discover our capacity to love. So as we begin to embrace loss from that perspective, it helps us to transcend sometimes the anger or the injustice of having someone taken from us before we're ready for that to happen. The words we speak not only determine how we think, but they also determine what we are even capable of thinking about. The words we use determine what we are even capable of conceiving as possible in our lives. And this, I'll just give you a beautiful example. Andrew Newberg is a neuroscientist, and I use a quote from him as the epigraph to the beginning of the book. And what he says is, a single word has the power to change the genes that influence the stress in our lives. So one word can actually upregulate or downregulate a portion of our DNA as we're responding to what life is showing us. So what it tells us is that words are more than simply words, that the words we use have a powerful influence in our worldview as well as our view of ourselves. The way these understandings came about early in the 20th century, Yale University, there was a professor at Yale University who was teaching linguistics, and he took a sabbatical. He took a semester off, and he needed someone to replace him. So he invited a colleague who was not formally trained in linguistics to teach a course in native language. To teach this course, the man had to do some research in the native language. The man's name was Benjamin Lee Whorf. Some people I know are familiar with that name. And the native language that he chose to explore in his course was the Hopi language. And one of the first things that he discovered about the Hopi language was that in Hopi, they have no words for anything other than the present moment. In the Hopi language, there's no word for the past, no word for the future, no word for over here or over there. Everything is present, everything is alive, everything is in the moment. So what this means, for example, if you were standing with a Hopi, so if we were standing on a mountain top in the high desert of northern New Mexico and we saw lightning, in Hopi, we cannot say, look at that lightning over there. What we would hear the Hopi say is, it is lightning-ing, because it is alive, it is present now. Or if we were on the beach looking at a wave, we would say, The wave is waving because it is not a noun. It is happening in the moment now. And the reason this is important is because in the Hopi view of the world, and I think many people know this, as well as other native traditions, not only Hopi, there is a sense of harmony and beauty in the world. They know everything is connected, everything is alive, everything it is conscious. The rock is conscious, the tree is conscious, the animals are conscious, the sky. And that harmony and that worldview, Benjamin Lee Whorf believed, is the result of the words that they use to express their relationship to the world. Now, where this gets interesting is in the English language is based in separation. There is me and you, here and there, then and now, good and bad, right and wrong, light and dark, success and failure. And so we tend to see the world and solve our problems through those kinds of thinking. There have always been words that our ancestors have used, or collections of words or phrases that they turned to in times of need, in times of loss, when they felt they needed protection, when they were in fear, that have helped them to feel differently and navigate those difficult times. Those words are preserved in their prayers, in the chants, and the Buddhist chants, the Hindu chants, the Tibetan chants, in the mantras. They are preserved on the temple walls that we see in Egypt, and on the tombs as instructions for the soul in terms of how to feel worthy enough to move into the next world. The Navajo prayer of beauty that reminds us that beauty already exists in all things. Well, we don't have to create it. Our job is to find it, to seek it out, and to see the world and the events of our lives through the lens of the beauty. And that changes us. In the presence of beauty, we change the way we think, we change the way we feel. And now the science is telling us that changes the way our neurons are connecting. That in turn changes the chemistry that is released in our bodies. And we are literally changed in the presence of beauty. It's more than simply an aesthetic. The beauty prayer, 3 short phrases: the beauty that I live with, the beauty that I live by, the beauty upon which I base my life. I say this prayer to myself at least once a day, out loud or silently, to remind myself that the beauty already exists. I have to find it. My job is to find it in whatever the world is showing me, and that's a workshop sometimes. The beauty that I live by invites me to allow that beauty to become the lens through which I view the world, not the polarization of mainstream media or my friends, my well-meaning friends on social media who are trying to get me to back one cause or another cause or believe in something. The beauty upon which I base my life. It's an invitation for me to allow the power of beauty to become the foundation upon which I make my choices and my decisions, my interactions with other people, and how I honor myself. And that is just one example of one of the wisdom codes, the beauty prayer. And it's an example that shows how the words, changing the neurons, changing the chemistry, change us. And the beauty is we don't have to know a lot of technical science to enjoy this, although the science is there if we want to understand for ourselves why these things work the way they work. There is a new science emerging that is called hope theory. And this, I think, goes directly to intention, because intention, well-intentioned people have used intention for a long time in the only ways they understood. But what we know is that intention means different things to different people. And what the science of hope theory tells us is that it's good to have the intention, but it's not enough to have only the intention. To stack the deck of success and our failure, we need to have a strategy that allows our intention to come to fruition. And this is, it's a little bit different way for people to think, for some people possibly, but it parallels what our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have always said to us about how we see ourselves in the world and the actions that we must embrace and embody in our everyday lives that follow the image or the vision or the well-meaning that we have in our hearts. So it's so interesting to me, because when people talk about the quantum world, and even when I go to conferences, I see world-renowned physicists doing this, Alec. They say, okay, now we know there's a field out there. There's a field that exists out there. It's been proven at the CERN superconducting super collider in Geneva, Switzerland. No doubt in our mind, there's a field out there, and look what they're doing. Out there, they're separating themselves from the field. Where's the boundary? Where the field ends and we begin. And the moment you draw that boundary, you fall into the ancient trap that keeps us separate, that keeps us powerless, because it leads us to feel and tells us that we are not part of that field. And the reality is that we are the field. Every atom of our body, your body, my body, our viewers right now, the atoms that make up the molecules of our body right now, they are emerging from that field, some of them, and some are collapsing back into that field. There's this constant dance. We are emerging and collapsing into the field. What the ancients tell us, the Buddhists tell us this so beautifully. The Sing Sing hymn, for example, in the Zen text, tells us that we are actually wrinkles. We are disturbances in an otherwise homogeneous field. And that the wrinkle of Gregg, for example, I am a wrinkle held in place by my consciousness, the way I think of myself and the way I present myself in the world. So my consciousness is what is directing those atoms as they emerge and collapse into the form of my body, into the form of my expression. And when I'm no longer in this world, I go back into that homogeneous field. So once we begin to understand that, and there's a fine line between science and poetry. I mean, it's all about the language, it's all about the words. So nature is simple, science is simple until we make it complex, with complex words and mathematics. Very, very simple. And when we begin to really, really get the simplicity of our relationship, that we are the field, then the idea of attention takes on perhaps an even new and more powerful meaning, because it tells us that first we simulate in our heart and in our mind, we simulate the potential of what it is that we want to experience. So this is the beauty of the human experience, and to the best of our knowledge, no other form of life, Alec, can do what we do. No other form of life can begin with an image, a sense of what they choose to experience, and then modify and change and hone that image and say, oh, I don't want that, but I'd like a little bit more of this, until we get it just right. We are simulating in our consciousness what it is that we choose to experience, and then it is our love for what we have simulated, or our fear of what we are simulating, that sets into motion the energy in the field that allows this event to happen. That's our intention. It's our love or our fear. And sometimes people have conscious and subconscious fears of what it is that's happening. There was a time in my life when Tibet was very accessible to me in a way that it is not currently. So we had the opportunity to be in some really remote and isolated monasteries that had not been disturbed or destroyed the way some of the more accessible ones had. And one of the first things that I noticed was these beautiful mandalas that Tibetans had in the chanting halls. I would ask them, what do these images mean? And what they told me blew me away. We're talking about sound and how powerful sound is. Sometimes the sound is verbalized as a word. Sometimes the sound is created as a sound through the vocal cords, but not recognized as a word. 1,500 years ago, if you wanted to preserve that sound, how would you do that? We have no recorders, no cell phones or anything like that. But the science of cymatics gives us insight into what we're talking about here. It is the science of pumping vibration into a substance. It could be a liquid or a powdered substance, and the vibration will create a replicable pattern in that substance. Well, what the Tibetans began to tell us is that those mandalas are the patterns from the sound that they create. And if we can create the sound in our body that creates that pattern, now we are mimicking the teachings that they left 1,500 years ago. It was a very ancient, very ingenious way for them to preserve in the teachings the powerful healing sounds. And when you go into the monasteries, there are sequences of sounds. You make this sound first, then this sound, then this sound, and the mudras that go along with those, and they're all depicted on those temple walls. So what this tells us is that the power of sound and the ability for us to create sounds that influence and change our bodies for many different reasons, whether it's for intention, as we talked about, or whether it's for healing, that knowledge has been with us for a very long time. Science is only now catching up with the mathematics and with the theory that validates and confirms what our ancestors have said to us for a very long time. So I used the Tibetan traditions as one tradition because the visual component here in the American desert Southwest, our indigenous ancestors, all the native traditions all along the Front Range and down into the Sangre de Cristos and over into the Four Corners area and out into Arizona, they have very powerful oral traditions where father to son and mother to daughter and generation to generation, they pass on, they say, make exactly this sound when you do this prayer or this chant. And in that way, the tradition is carried on without the written record as they do in Tibet. So we live in a world, the field, we are the field is vibration, and we are born, we're wired with the ability to create our own vibration to influence the vibration that we find ourselves within. Even sound means different things to different people. Sound is vibration. Okay, so what we're really talking about is vibration. It becomes sound when we can hear it. And some people have capabilities to hear things that other people do not. So a sound may be perceptible by someone and not by someone else. So ultimately, we're talking about vibration. A lot of that vibration is in the range that is audible, where we can hear it. The science behind the music is what fascinates me. When I was a kid, I used to say, you know, where did the notes come from that create the chord that feels good in my body? A G chord is a very healing, and an open G on a guitar is very healing. Where did the notes come from that make that? And to understand where those notes came from, I had to understand the mathematics of music and the relationship of tonality and scales and frequency. And it is a deep, deep relationship that we have with this primal vibration that we find ourselves in the world today, and being able to tune that vibration in very specific ways that are meaningful to us to make the notes that make that G chord, you know? And we don't think about that very often, but sound makes the world go round. Sound is, and vibration plays such a fundamental role. It is such a primal role because we begin responding to it before we even are consciously aware that we're responding to it. We begin responding as babies will respond to this, to very certain sounds and in specific ways and other sounds in other ways, because it's a language unto itself. Without words, the sound is a language. And when you combine the words that we make with those sounds, it's even more powerful and more potent. The sound, for me, it's important, and it's one aspect that comes back into this fundamental revolution that we are experiencing right now of humanness. What does it mean to be human? And what is the role of humanness in our lives? And there's an emerging philosophy that consciousness informs itself through its creations. You know, think about that. Consciousness informs itself through its creations. That means the books we write, the music we create, the sounds we make, the movies that we make in Hollywood, in addition to being entertaining and being diversions, they may actually be telling us something about ourselves, us, consciousness, asking ourselves through our creations to remind ourselves of deep truths within ourselves. And you look at the movies that are most popular, and the ones young kids are drawn to especially, are superpowers within us. And they speak to us because there's some part of us that knows that we are capable of so much more than we've been led to believe. So there's a transhuman movement that is conditioning a younger generation to believe that the human body is essentially a fluke of biology, a mistake of nature, that we need to replace our soft technology with wires and chips and chemicals. And we are at this crossroad right now, and one of my latest books, Human by Design, talks about this, where we're only beginning to understand that we are the technology. Instead of wires and chips and chemicals, we are blood and neurons and cell membranes, much more sophisticated than any chip could ever be. And as we learned to self-regulate this powerful operating system, this soft technology, what we find is that we have less need for that external technology. The new discoveries are telling us that we are literally wired to thrive, not just survive. We are wired to thrive in times of extremes like no other form of life. We are the only form of life that is known to exist on Earth today that can consciously self-regulate our own biology at will, on demand. What that means is that we're the only form of life that we know of today on Earth that can consciously sit down in a moment in time and choose to feel, to think, to breathe in very precise ways. We are mysterious beings of a mysterious origin, of emotion and thoughts and imagination outpictured through this physical body. And the beauty is you don't have to know any of it. You don't have to know any of that, but it helps. If you're going to change the way you think about your body and your life in the world, if you need encouragement to say that I have what I need to get through this, it helps to see the new discoveries that reveal the astonishing, magnificent beauty of what it means to be fully human. And once we really begin to get that, teach it to our kids in the schools, embrace it in the society that now is emerging. More than ever, we're being asked, we're being challenged. What role does our body play in the presence of what the world is showing us? And the new discoveries are giving us new ways to answer that. I can't think of a more exciting time to be alive. Human resilience, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physiologically, and in our environment all come to play. And it is a beautiful place where all of this comes together in science, spirituality, and social policy. And I think we're living that place right now. It's all about love. When we love, not if, but when we love ourselves enough to give ourselves what we need to be at our best. So we love ourselves enough to give our bodies what they need to do what they are made to do. And you know what this is. It's good nutrition. It's adequate sleep. It's movement. It's the kinds of thought, feeling, and emotion that honor these deep relationships we have with ourselves. When we love ourselves enough to give ourselves what we need, what we find is that we thrive, not just survive, but we thrive in the presence. We live our lives based upon the way we have been taught to think about ourselves. We live our lives based upon our story. We choose our relationships based upon our story. And I want people to think about this. Every person that's in your life right now is based upon your self-esteem, your sense of self-worth, the way you've been taught to think about your relationship to other people in the world. So the people that you invite into your life, the people that you invite into your home, and we're all adults here and this is important, the people you invite into your bed, your most intimate relationships are all based upon your story, the way you've been taught to think about yourself. We heal our bodies based upon our story. When we go to a medical professional or a holistic professional and they say that something is happening with us that may not be in our best interest, something in our body is happening that may not be in our best interest, the way we respond to that information is based upon our story. Our social policies, our world is changing. Boy, is it ever. My world is changing, your world is changing. Wherever you are in the world watching this, You are impacted by a change like we've never seen before. And the way that we respond to that change is based upon our story, our social policies, the laws that we enact, policies that we embrace, the way we treat one another in our homes, in our communities, in our society, in our nation, and between nations. So all of a sudden, you begin to see when we talk about our story, rather than being academic on the back burner and something just interesting, it's on the front burner for all of us. It's up for all of us. Nothing could be more important. And this even covers the way that our body functions, our response to contagions in the environment, our immune response, our longevity, our resilience, our intuition, all are based in the way that we access these things according to our story. And this is interesting because so the question is, where's our story come from? We all have a story. We may not be consciously aware of it, but it's there. Story comes from our family. There is a battle playing out for our story right now because the stakes have never been higher, Shamini. The stakes have never been higher on this planet. There's a battle for our thoughts. There's a battle for our beliefs. And I think we all sense that. What we may not know is there's a battle for our very humanness, the very essence of what it is that separates us from all other forms of life and makes us so unique. The very essence of those potentials is now being threatened. I was taught that we live in a universe that's dead and inert. It's a universe that happened by luck, by accident, when all of exactly the right parameters aligned in exactly the right way and exactly the right time to give us what we have today. And within that dead inner universe, I was taught that we as humans are the product of an accident of biology, what's called lucky biology, random mutations that have led to us being who we are today through a process that I was taught was made possible through competition and conflict. I was taught that competition in nature and conflict is what assured the success of our species, our ability to win out over other species. All right, now that is a broad brushstroke overview of the old story. Now I'm going to contrast that, the new story. The best science of the modern world, number one, it's telling us the universe is alive and it is conscious, that we live in a living universe where rather than being the rare exception, you would expect life to occur because we are a living and connected universe. The new science is showing us, and this is so powerful, that the fundamental rule of nature that Charles Darwin in 1859, when he released his theory of the origins of the origin of species, was the title of the book he released in 1859, and he put forth this theory that the fundamental rule of nature is competition and conflict, and that we live in this world of scarcity. We've got to fight for our survival, and he coined that. He named it survival of the strongest. When I say this to young people in an audience, they say, cool, Greg, 1859 was a long time ago. So what? We're in 21st century. We've got the internet, we've got TikTok, high tech. Who cares? What difference does it make? And it's a good question. And my answer surprises them, because what I say to them is yes, we're in a modern world, but the foundations of our society were put forth in the late 1800s and the early 1900s based upon the story that was believed at that time. The story that we are separate, the story that nature's based, the fundamental nature is competition. So it's no surprise. Our economic system that's collapsing and is so unfair is based upon this false assumption of competition. Corporate structure is based upon the competition. The way we share vital resources, food, energy, water, medicine with our global family are based upon this false assumption. And now it's being tested because the world has changed. And those ideas that worked sort of in the other world are failing us in this world. And the good news is that we have a new story to fall back on. And it's a story that's based in truth, honest, factual science. It's a science that is rarely shared in the mainstream. And that's the big picture. And now when it comes to us, the science is also showing us that we are not the product of random processes, random mutation. We're much more than lucky biology. Now, I have to be very clear when I say what I'm about to say. I'm a scientist. I'm a degreed geologist, is my first degree. And I am not a denier when it comes to evolution. I believe in evolution. I've seen it in the fossil record for many forms of life, for plants, animals, and insects. The data does not support evolution as the story of anatomically modern human emergence, what are called AMH, anatomically modern humans. The data fails us. Something extraordinary happened 200,000 years ago. Modern humans emerged upon the earth. And I'm saying this now because it's going to be important when we get into our potential. Because in the old story, we have been led to believe that we emerged on this planet in a biologically primitive form, and through a long, slow, gradual process, we have evolved to the point we are today. This is where the science fiction has become science fact. Many of our viewers probably remember the first movie, Jurassic Park, the best Jurassic Park, when scientists were able to extract the DNA from the fossilized remains of ancient forms of life. That was science fiction when that movie came out. It now is science fact. We have the ability to extract the DNA from the bone marrow of fossilized remains of ancient forms of life, including those that I was taught were my ancestors that I descended from when I was in school back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And here's the deal. It is like an earthquake that has sent shockwaves through the world of evolution and biology, because what the DNA is telling us, Shamini, we compare the genome of the forms of life that we used to think that we descended from with our genome today. We haven't changed. We emerged, we appeared mysteriously on Earth 200,000 years ago with all of the extraordinary potentials and capabilities that we have right now. When we appeared as anatomically modern humans, there were mutations in our DNA, in our genome. There were human chromosome number 2 is one of the most astounding. It is the product of a fusion of pre-existing chromosomes that after the fusion happened, genes were added, genes were taken away to stabilize that fusion. It gives us the extraordinary neocortex that we have and the ability for empathy, sympathy, compassion, self-regulation. Chromosome 7 is what gives us chromosome number 7 in primates. 75 million years it was stable. And exactly 200,000 years ago, there was a little switch that linked the brain with the tongue, with the mouth, that gives us the ability for complex language and speech. So scientists say that there was an intervention, but they have to leave it at that because they cannot say, science is not equipped to go beyond telling us what, they can tell us what happened, but they can't necessarily interpret how or why. But the average human, it said, has about 50 trillion cells, give or take, in the human body. Every one of those 50 trillion cells has an electrical potential, about 0.07 volts. And you say, well, that's not very much. And I say, well, you're right, until you do the math. 0.07 volts times 50 trillion cells. And think about that. We have an electrical potential in our bodies about 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential. What would happen if we could harness that and direct it toward our own healing, or toward our longevity enzymes that we all have in our bodies, or toward our intuition, or toward our resilience, or toward deep states of inner knowing that are revealed in so many of our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions? So if we could do that, but it doesn't end there. Every one of those 50 trillion cells, it functions as a transistor, just like in a resistor, just like the old transistors and resistors in our old television sets. Some of you remember those, or the old telephones. Now they're miniaturized on to the chips in the computer that is in the machine you're watching me on, or on the mobile phone. Every one of our cells does that. We are resistors, we are transistors. Every one of our cells is a capacitor. It stores information and releases it when it reaches a certain threshold. Every cell in our body releases photons of light and is a photon receptor. We receive photons of light. Light is information. We are constantly interacting with our we call the external environment, the field, through this exchange of collapsing and emerging photons. Every cell in our body has antennae on the outside that are attuned to electromagnetic frequencies, and the very DNA and the genes in the DNA also function as antennae. We are gated circuits. We store and retrieve information in memory just like we do on the computers, and so much more. Many of the powers that be do not know what we're talking about. So the choices and decisions that they're making are based upon the old story. And this is why I say the stakes have never been higher. We have a planet at stake, and life on the planet is at stake. And I think what's important is, rather than judging those people for the choices that they're making or judging ourselves, and there is a conditioning, it's based upon this story of competition, struggle, and separation. We have been taught, Shamani, to demonize the things that no longer work for us. We've been taught to demonize and hate, to justify moving in a new direction, making new decisions. From my perspective, I think it may not serve us to do that. We all have had a lifetime of feeling inadequate, of our stories telling us, that we're not worthy, of right and wrong and good and bad, and comparing ourselves to success and failure. And all of that only works if you have some model that you are comparing yourself to. But if you let that model go, then everything we've done in the past is simply our experience. It's our learning curve. And we have to say that it worked because we're here now. It worked to get us where we are. And now that we have new understandings, we can let those understandings go, bless them, let them go with grace. It's not so much about a mistake or about goodness or badness or rightness or wrongness or revenge or any of that. This is a new day. It's a new world. We are perhaps more unified in that understanding than we have been for a very long time. The whole world knows that we're in this together and that we're going somewhere. But here's the beauty of this conversation. Where we're going hasn't happened yet because we're creating it through what we understand right now. And as we embrace these understandings that we're talking about, and they have a lot of implications. They have social and political implications, certainly implications in terms of energy and where our energy in the planet comes from, and how we feed one another and how we heal one another. So story is a big deal. So if we can move from this point forward without judging ourselves or judging others in the past, I think it's a really healthy way to do this. Now, one of the places where this is coming up, because the world is changing, and because of our story that has taught us that we are powerless victims of a world that we cannot control, there is a greater desire to create stuff out there, external technology, to replace our soft technology so that we feel good and safe in the world, feel good about ourselves, feel safe in the world. And we're also being told that we need this external technology to achieve our greatest potentials. And in whole, in mass, that movement is being called the transhumanism movement. I'm not anti-technology, but here's the thing, and this is a conversation that scientists have had since I've been in the scientific world. There are two schools of thought when it comes to scientists. Some scientists believe that because we figure out how to do something, it gives us the license to go forward full throttle and do that. Other scientists say because we figure out how to do something doesn't mean that we need to carry it to its greatest expression, that we need to throttle that discovery with things like morality, with human values. And this is where technology and transhumanism is coming in. The technology is available right now to replace much of the human body. And because the story has led people to believe, some people, that carbon-based life, that's us, we're carbon-based life, is imperfect, that carbon-based life is flawed, that we are the product of lucky biology in a lucky universe to begin with. Their thinking is that we need to replace this flawed carbon-based body with machines. Here's the slippery slope. We've all heard the expression, use it or lose it. And our biology functions in a very similar way. We are this extraordinary, highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology that has the ability to self-regulate, self-heal, to heal our own bodies, to regenerate, to rejuvenate in a way that no other form of life has. And when we begin to replace the neurons and glands and the blood and the chemicals in our bodies with computer chips and wires and other chemicals, we begin to lose those capabilities. They atrophy if we don't use them. Now, in one generation, if we stop using certain classes of neurons, then the connections of those neural networks begin to atrophy. And the next generation, the body says, well, I guess we don't need those anymore. And they may stop producing altogether. And we're actually seeing this happen as technology is beginning to replace, in some societies, our most intimate human relationships. And I'm talking about human intimacy in terms of emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy. It's being replaced by technology and games. And what's happening in those societies is the birth rate is declining because infertility is increasing and sperm counts are dropping. Use it or lose it. We have right now the ability to implant a computer chip, into the human brain that gives us direct access to the hard drive of our computer without the use of a keyboard. So when I say this in an audience of young people, I have no children of my own, so I learn a lot from the young people in my audience. What they say, the first thing they say, wait a minute, you mean I could do my gaming without ever using a keyboard? But because they've never been taught how precious and rare, and I'll just go the extra mile and say sacred, not from a religious perspective, but from a deeply spiritual perspective, how sacred this internal technology is. And if you've not been taught that, then your responsibility, why not? Why not put a chip in my brain so I can access my computer hard drive? So it's being offered recreationally. And this is the thing, if we embrace these technologies recreationally in one generation, what is it that we're compromising? And so again, I'm going to be clear. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm not saying do it or don't do it. What I am saying is that we need a cautionary pause because we are at the crash rate, transhumanism and biology, what it means to be human. When we compromise our humanness and those abilities begin to atrophy, we need to know how much of this is the question, how much of ourselves do we give away to the technology? How much of our humanness do we give to the technology? We can't answer that until we know who we are. Consciousness informs itself through its creations. I think that's a big, big statement. That consciousness teaches itself and reminds itself of who it is through the things that consciousness builds. So music, I'm a musician, I love that idea. Books, poetry, sculpture, dance, movement, technology. All of the external technology that we're building in one way or another mimics what we already do, except we do it better. AI cannot be programmed for empathy and sympathy and compassion. And the question is, do we cherish those values enough to embrace them within ourselves before we compromise our very humanness with a technology based on an old story? I mentioned the computer chip in the brain, and I don't want to leave people with a sense that it's wrong to do these things. It's not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's how we apply it. There are instances where men and women coming back from the battlefields of Afghanistan and Iraq, halfway around the world, have lost, in some cases, two legs and one arm, and come home to their families in that condition. And if that computer chip can communicate with the brain to a prosthetic that allows them to hold their children in their arms and to brush their own teeth and wash their own hair. And one man is now playing the piano as the expert pianist that he was because of that technology. Wow, what an awesome, beautiful, powerful, just brings tears to my eyes. So we have done that. We've created that. It's about how we apply it every day. The question I want to leave people with, do we love ourselves enough? Do you love yourself enough to live your life in a way that allows you to be the very best version of your potential? One of the very, very powerful phrases, it is a parable that came to me early in my life when I was just a kid. Had a very powerful impact on me. When the student asked the master, Jesus, what is it that we can do when life is difficult? You know, when we are persecuted for our beliefs, or when our loved ones are taken from us and we feel powerless to do anything about that, what can we do? And the words of the master were so powerful then, and I cannot help but believe that they will empower us today. So let me just share these words from memory. What Jesus said was, that which is within you, if you bring forth that which is within you, it will save you. If you do not bring forth that which is within you, it will destroy you. And I think there's a lot of truth to what he said, because within each of us is the power of love, the love that can transcend any darkness, any loss, any hurt that comes into our lives. We have that power. We have to allow that power to come forward. We have the power to forgive. We have the power that allows us to forgive the things that have hurt us the most. And this love, what the master tells us, is that the deeper that we are hurt, the depth of our hurt illustrates our capacity for love. And think about that just for a moment, because we've all been hurt deeply. Have you ever considered that the depth of your hurt is teaching you about how deeply you can reach into your capacity for love, not just to survive, but to transcend that hurt? Well, this is another example of one of the wisdom codes. I have used this many, many times in my life to remind me that whatever it is that I'm facing in life, if I bring forth my love and my forgiveness, it will save me. And you all know that if you do not, if you harbor the hurt, the unresolved hurt, the unresolved fear within you, that it creates the chemistry and the biology that will destroy you. Your cells that give you the very thing you cherish the most, and that's life itself.
So I've had the opportunity to begin my healing from the place where we are conditioned to think that it leads, to feel the feeling as if the healing has already happened. In other programs, I've talked about this. I went through a physical in the year 2000. There was a tumor inside my bladder that doctors wanted to operate on physically. I acknowledged that. I applied everything that I had learned in my life, and I really applied it. I didn't just kind of apply it. I lived the deepest truths, the existence of everything that I'm saying to you in this program, and it takes work. It takes work to do that. And I did that work, and when I went back, fully prepared for surgery if it was needed, what the doctors found was there's no need for the surgery. But I've done this with cuts and scrapes as well. Our bodies will respond. We're part of the field. We're emerging from this field, and we communicate with the field in a language that recognizes emotion, feeling. So the principles that I'm sharing in this mode are very simple. They're also very ancient. And everything I'm saying to you, we see the instructions for this kind of prayer, for this code that allows us to speak directly to the matrix. We see these principles recorded in some of our most ancient, cherished spiritual traditions. And I'm talking about lost biblical books. These are the books that were discovered in the mid-20th century as the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt. Remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest records of the Old Testament. The Nag Hammadi Library are the oldest records of the New Testament, both of them found in the mid-20th century, the 1940s. And in that Nag Hammadi Library, the 43 plus books that were completely removed from the biblical canon in the 4th century by the Emperor Constantine were intact in the Nag Hammadi Library, including the Gospel of Thomas that we've spoken about earlier. Thomas the scribe, that followed the master, Jesus, the teacher, not a religious man from this perspective, but he followed the teacher
and he recorded the words, the exact words of the teacher. And this is important because there is a place in the Gospel of Thomas where his students asked the teacher how to communicate with the field. They didn't use those terms. They asked how to communicate with God. And it's in the Gospel of Thomas that we find the instructions for the fifth mode, the lost mode of prayer. Now, I mentioned earlier that you've heard the term when something is lost in translation. And it is this translation that I'm going to share with you from this biblical book. So it's in the Gospel of Thomas that we actually find the instructions for this fifth or this lost mode of prayers, as I mentioned. So let me first read to you the translation in the authorized version of the King James Bible as we see it today. If you'd like to see this for yourself, it's in King James Version. The book of John 16 through 23 is where you would find this. I know you've heard this before. How many of you have heard, ask and ye shall receive? That's where this comes from. Let me read you the translation. The translation goes like this. Whatsoever ye ask the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Ask and ye shall receive, that your joy may be full. Okay, and that's the end of the translation. I don't know about you. When I was a kid, I would ask and ask and ask, and not much would happen. And I became very frustrated. Many people do. And we feel powerless. We feel that our prayers really aren't making any difference because we're not seeing any way to reinforce that our prayers have actually done something. They've made a difference. But I want to go back into the original Aramaic translation, and Greek and Aramaic both, but this is going to be from the original Aramaic. In the Gospel of Thomas, you see Greek and Aramaic, is why I'm clarifying this. And I want to read you, and it's very close, but there's a powerful and subtle difference that was left out in the translation, and it may very well be because the translators did not understand what you and I are exploring right now. Because they didn't understand it, they simply streamlined the languaging. In the original text, it begins a very similar way. Quote, all things that you ask straightly, directly, from inside my name, you'll be given. Okay, now here comes the translation that was in error. This is the original. Ask without hidden motive and be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness be full. That is a single, very powerful statement. I'm going to break this down. Ask without hidden motive. That is inviting you to ask without attachment to the outcome. It's actually a very Buddhist concept. Ask without attachment to the rightness, the wrongness, the goodness, the badness, or the joy or the disappointment as to whether or not your prayer is answered. Without attachment to the outcome, okay? Be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire. The only way to be is if those things are already present. Your prayer is already answered. You're coming from the place that the prayer has already been answered. So the key to what we're saying here, feel the feeling. Feel as if the prayer is already answered with as many senses as you can. Smell, touch, taste, hearing. Feel as if your body is already healed. Feel as if your perfect relationship is already present. Feel as if your abundance is already present. Invoke all of those senses. I suggested a new model for creation and the way that it works, and a new philosophy that says that our creation, that consciousness, is constantly informing us of ourselves through our creations. The things that we create, art, music, books, the things that we create that we believe are entertainment or creative expression, in addition to those things, that they are actually us informing us of ourselves, informing us of our relationship to the field, so that we can remind ourselves of this very powerful internal technology. Prayer is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here. Now, I'm going to do this in a very condensed format to give you the sense for what I'm saying, and then you can take this idea and you can apply it in your own prayers. I'm going to give you a template to do just that. I worked in the corporations and as a scientist, as a senior computer systems designer during the Cold War years. I understand computer systems really well. And one of the things that amazed me is no matter how complex or how simple they are, whether we're writing 3 million lines of code, which happens with some of the systems that are being used in the research industry, or just a couple of lines of code, the programs will always follow the same template. Here's the template.
there is always an introduction that tells the program what is about to happen. They're called declaration statements. Then, following the declaration, there is the work, the body of the program that's actually doing the calculations. And then there is a close, something to bring the program to closure. All right? That is the way the most sophisticated computer systems in our world work today. If we are building in our world, if consciousness is informing us in our world, something we know and need to know about ourselves, then the question is it possible that those most sophisticated computers can be telling us something about the way we communicate with the matrix? The answer is yes. The template that allows the most sophisticated computers and the way to work the way it works is precisely the template that allows your prayers to work the way they work. And your prayers, when you build your prayers, I'm going to invite you to do precisely this. The first statement of your prayer, a declaration statement. Tell the field, tell the matrix, tell consciousness, tell God what it is that you're about to do. In a single phrase or a brief sentence, be concise. You can simply say, this is a prayer of healing for my body, or a prayer of healing regarding my loved ones. And then in the code, what is it that you want to happen, but come from the place that it's already happened. Give thanks for what has already occurred. I give thanks for the perfection of my body, for the healing of my body, for the healing of my loved ones, for the healing of my relationship, right? This is the body of the code. The closure, so beautiful and so powerful. In the closure, we're telling the field that it's already done. And for the closure, the texts invite us to use the original Aramaic. The original Aramaic, there's something about these words. Let me share them with you. The words La Alam, Amin, Amen. La Alam, Amin, Amen. At the end of your prayer, what does that mean? It means I seal this prayer in trust and faith and truth. Amen. I can't think of a more powerful, more sophisticated, more beautiful technology that has been left to us than our ability to communicate with this field in a meaningful way. And I've just shared with you one template. There may be others. This is a very powerful template that was left to us 2,500 years ago that allows us to do just that. The bottom line of everything I'm saying to you is through the fifth mode of prayer, our feeling-based prayer, we are given the ability to communicate directly with the possibilities that exist in the universal field, in this divine matrix, and to do so in a language that the matrix recognizes. Our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have preserved the knowledge and the technique to interact with the divine matrix and for us to rewrite our personal as well as the global reality code.
If you have followed my work in the past, you know that this is almost the 36th year that I've offered this work in one form or another. As a scientist, is that we as scientists have been conditioned to look at what happens in the world in terms of boxes that we can be comfortable studying. So we call those boxes like chemistry and geology and biology and physics. While it's good to study those boxes, the truth is, the reality is that nature doesn't know about those boxes. We have a world, we have life. And if we are truly going to understand and become masters of our experience, we've got to cross those traditional boundaries that have separated the sciences in the past. I remember in the late 1970s, early 1980s, as a geologist, I was watching the magnetic fields of the Earth go through very rapid shifts. They're continuing right now. The magnetic fields of our planet are shifting. And my question to my geological colleagues, I said, wow, the magnetic fields of the Earth are changing. What does that mean for us? What's it mean for humans? And they had their little geology blinders on, and they said, you know, don't ask me. I'm a geologist. Go ask a biologist. So I asked my biology friends, I'd say, you know, the magnetic fields of the Earth are changing. What does that mean? And they say, hell, we don't know. We're biologists. We're not taught to think in terms of the effects of Earth upon living systems. Now, this was in the 70s and 80s. It's changing because we are, in fact, living a time of extremes. Now, I know that's not new for anyone watching this. People know, even the people that used to resist the fact that something is different, now are asking what's going on. Everybody knows something's up. The question is, what's up? So I, as a scientist, I'm a systems thinker, first of all. And what that means is I tend to look at the big picture first. The big picture. I mean, I like to go out into the cosmos and see how all these cosmic systems are working. Then I like to leave that behind and go into the nano instant of right now and what's happening in my life and your life and my community's life, and how it's being influenced by what's happening in the cosmos. I want to talk about cycles of time. What we now know as scientists is that we are living a rare convergence. We in the world right now, we are living a rare convergence of multiple nested cycles, natural rhythms that change the way that we think, they change the way that we live. And the three primary rhythms that are driving the changes in the world right now, I'm going to mention them briefly. The first of these is climate. Now, we all know that climate is changing. As a geologist, I want to be very clear on where I am personally on this. Climate change is a fact. That's the whole point. It is a fact, and we need to change the way we think and live so that the climate change has less of an impact on our lives. It's clinging to an old way of thinking and living in the presence of a cycle that no longer supports that way of thinking and living. That's where the problem comes from. That's where the suffering comes from. We are also living the convergence of an economic cycle. Those of you who studied economy know of a man named Kondratiev. This is a Kondratiev cycle, and what you can see on your screen is that he broke economic cycles down into seasons according to nature. I love this. So there's a spring and a fall and a winter and a summer in terms of economic cycles. Each season has its characteristics where some things hold value and some things lose value, where interest rates climb or interest rates decline, where inflation is high or inflation is low. We now are in the spring of a new economic cycle. If you look at the lower left-hand part of your screen, you can see this. It is a very unsettling time because assets that we used to think held value are losing their value. Paper assets, like stocks in companies, for example, and tangible assets like land, like water, like food, like metals. These are the things that begin to hold their value better in the spring of an economic cycle. They are linked to a cycle that a lot of people have never heard about. It is called the conflict cycle. Now, when I was speaking at the United Nations with my dear friend, my spiritual brother, my colleague, Dr. Bruce Lipton, we were invited to speak at the UN together as a team. And we shared the science that shows that cooperation is the fundamental rule of nature, not competition. And when we talked about conflict cycles, they were surprised because the thinking is that conflict just happens when it happens. There is a correlation between conflict and natural rhythms and natural cycles. I'm going to just do it at a very high level. The heart and the brain, human heart and human brain, are the strongest biomagnetic generators in the human body. The heart is much stronger than the brain, all right? When the magnetic fields of our Earth are in flux, they influence the magnetic fields of the heart. And the net effect is that when the magnetic fields are strong, we are more cooperative, less aggressive, more willing to work together to solve our problems. When the magnetic fields are weak, it's the opposite of all that. We are vulnerable to conflict. What you see in this chart is if you look at the tops and the bottoms of these rhythms, they are directly linked to the solar cycles of our sun, where the magnetic fields ebb and flow, influencing the magnetic fields of the Earth that ebb and flow, influencing human consciousness and our willingness to either cooperate or solve our problems through conflict. And you're seeing this very clearly in this particular rhythm. Yeah, I could do other wars and you could see the same thing. Now, I want to be very clear. We are not slaves to this cycle. We always have choice. We can always choose. And the beauty of what you're seeing is not only are we vulnerable to conflict, but if you look at this closely, you will see that we are now in the greatest opportunity for peace. that we will have or have had for a very long time, because the beginnings and the endings of the great wars in the past happened at the tops and the bottoms of those cycles. If you know where you are in the cycle, it is the opportunity to become a good listener, to extend the olive branch of peace, to give another the benefit of the doubt. This is true between nations. It's true between members of our society. It's true between anyone experiencing conflict. It's true with members of your own family, your husbands, your wives, your partners, your spouse, your kids, your siblings, your co-workers. Humans are influenced by these fields. We are experiencing the result of three natural rhythms that are converging in a way that we've never seen, again, in 5,000 years, creating the chaos. And the chaos is what happens when you try to think and live in ways that do not reflect what the cycles are presenting in your life. And once you begin to see this, it makes perfect sense of what we need to do next. Our science has conditioned us to believe that we're separate from these influences and these effects. We document them, we watch them through telescopes, and we say, oh, isn't that interesting? What they're now beginning to understand is that we cannot separate our everyday experience from what's happening in the environment around us. So now we're talking about the physical environment. The environment, the magnetic fields primarily of the sun influencing the earth, and that in turn influencing through the neurons of the human heart, the way that we feel about ourselves. And what it does is it becomes very unsettling because old ideas and belief systems that worked in the system that we had before, because that system no longer exists, those ideas and beliefs are looking for new equilibrium. They're looking for a new harmony. Doesn't mean they're right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm not judging you here. It means that we are in the process of not seeking balance. It's not balance that we want, it's harmony. I want to make this distinction because in balance, nature doesn't like balance. In balance, nothing happens. If something is in perfect balance, nothing is happening. That's boring. Nature abhors balance. Nature wants harmony. So I live in a rural area, and our population of coyotes to rabbits is never in balance, but it always is in harmony. As more rabbits come available in a given season, all of a sudden we see more coyotes to keep that population in check. So nature's looking for harmony. You and I and all of my family viewing this, we are all seeking harmony in our lives in the presence of a system that is inharmonious right now because it's going through this change. This is the external physical environment. So we're in the change. We're not going to go back to a time where there was no change. So we might as well learn to thrive. And this is it. We don't want to survive. We want to thrive. We want to be the healthiest, most prosperous, the happiest beings that we can be. And that's all possible if we adapt to what the world is showing us, rather than trying to live what we're comfortable with in a world that no longer supports that. Such a powerful concept.